What's the vibe, chat? On God, this is happening. All right, keeping it short today, but trust there are fries in the bag. All right, hoping it lands and pulls you closer to the Father. Today we're going to be yapping about Matthew chapter 7. Now, what's interesting about this is when we got the group text for the leaders of the speakers of this event, I was the first one to pipe up, okay? They said, we're going to talk about Matthew. I said, I'll take Matthew chapter 7, please. Matthew chapter 7 for me is peak. High key, it's one of my favorite chapters. Primarily because it opened my eyes to the Torah. Now, sounds wild, I know. How did a slice of Yeshua's Sermon on the Mount get me locked in on keeping the Torah? No cap. I'll share the deets with you on that in a second. But first, let's walk this chapter together. It opens with the line everyone quotes, "Judge not, that you be not judged." Now, here's where folks get performative. Verses like this get chopped out of context all the time, and Matthew 7:1 stays in the top tier of the most misused. Back in 1996, some dude named Tupac dropped a song called "Only God Can Judge Me," and that slogan went viral before viral was a thing. Shirts, bumper stickers, the whole huzz. The vibe became, "You can't judge me, only God can." Then people started flexing with this verse, plucking it from its context just to glaze their own choices. Now, if you called out sin, you might catch a "judge not drive-by." If a public figure was clearly out of pocket and you spoke up, same energy. But it's time to clap back on that. Here's the big brain take. We are supposed to judge, not crash out condemn people. Judgment is not the same as condemnation. Judgment is evaluating if something lines up with Adonai's will. Condemnation is handing out an eternal sentence. These are different lanes. Scripture tells us to check fruit, like actually look at outcomes. Don't get fooled by the aesthetic. Yeshua says in John chapter 7, verse 24, "Don't judge by appearances, judge with right judgment." Is that a contradiction with Matthew chapter 7, verse 1? Not at all. It's the context key. You see, if you stop at verse 1 in Matthew chapter 7, you'll fumble the bag. See, we're going to keep reading here. It says, "Judge not, for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Translation, don't wield judgment like a clout sword. Use the same scale on yourself. If you swing unrighteous judgment, expect the boomerang. That's giving false witness and gets the sentence that the false... Hello? We got a dead microphone here. That's giving false witness. And it gets the sentence that he tried to put on the innocent, tough but fair. Then Yeshua doubles down in the next 4 verses. "Why do you see the speck that's in your brother's eye, but you don't notice the log that's in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when there's a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye. And then you will see clearly, take the speck out of your brother's eye. Don't give to dogs what is holy, and don't throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you." Translation, why spot your brother's speck when you're rocking a whole law? First, de-log your own eye. Then you'll actually see clear to help your brother. Keep your holy stuff on lock. Guard what's sacred. Real ones don't feed pigs or the ops. They'll trample it and bite back. Don't be cringe. If your setup is mid and sus, don't go chopping on others like you're gas. Level up inside so your character is top tier and elite. That's how you catch dubs. So, do we need to be perfect in making any call? Hard no. Not one single one of us is perfect, but we roll with the one who is perfect. And when we're submitted to him and walking in his instructions, our aura isn't performative. It's humble, kind, and loving. From there, we can make the righteous calls without glazing ourselves and without crashing out on others. The fruit test is legit. The standard is steady. The mercy is a free bag of chips. Unearned, but offered. So stay locked in. Now, moving on from there, we see this in verses 7 through 11. "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, it will be opened. Or which one of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him?" Now, There's a few ways to interpret this passage, and they typically, traditionally are. Side A, your lack is because you didn't ask. Low key, that's true. The Father wants to give you good gifts. You're his child. He wants to see you thrive, not crash out. He legit knows your heart, but he still loves when you communicate with. Think dad mode. I can guess what my kids want, but unless they actually tell me, I'm gonna miss. That's why communication is steez. When we pray and he answers, our faith starts cooking, because in it, we'll recognize his faithfulness, his goodness, and his grace. Now, side B, this is the caution side. This can go performative real fast. Some folks twist this verse like a pretzel and say things like, if you only had more faith, then you'd have more stuff. If you only had more faith, then you'd be more blessed. Just believe hard enough, and God will bankroll your best life. That is cap. High key. Adonai isn't some cosmic sugar daddy. You can't name it, claim it your way through like a full-grown adult. Blessing flows naturally when we're locked into his will, following his instructions, and walking in righteousness. If he withholds something, it's not him glazing you. He's just operating big brain wisdom. He knows what you need, when you need it, and how it should land. We mostly know what we want. And getting every want is a one-way ticket to tragedy, because our hearts want stuff that we shouldn't have. So no, Adonai isn't handing out serpents. He's protecting you from the whole chungus of consequences that you don't see yet. His provision, good. His track record, faithful, for real, for real. Judging God's goodness while your expectations are wild is dog water. Instead, ask, seek, knock, stay humble, stay submitted, stay locked in. The way he answers you might not look like your wish list, but it will be exactly what you need, free bags of chips included. What does Yeshua say right after he says, ask, seek, and knock? He hits us with this heart check. Put others first. Pray that they get blessed too. That's giving golden rule, but within context. Verses 12 through 14 say, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Enter by the narrow gate. For the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter it by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Now, we usually read that passage like, if you don't like it done to you, don't do it to others, right? I mean, that's how most of us have heard that from our parents, right? If you don't like it done to you, don't do it to others. Now, that is true, but low-key, that's not the full vibe here. If verses 1 through 6 are get your own house in order before you start chopping at someone else, and then verses 7 through 11 are ask the Father and he'll provide according to his will, then verses 12 through 14 are basically pray for others to win, because the narrow gate is tough and not everyone's locked in. So the golden rule isn't just to be nice, it's intercede so others find Adonai and walk in his ways, just like you hope that they're praying for you to do. High key, that reframe hits different. Bottom line, pray like you want others praying for you. Seek their good like you hope they're seeking your good. That's the golden rule in context. Cooked to perfection, no crumbs left. And it'll reshape your daily walk like a full-grown adult, by the way. Now, verses 15 through 20 circle back to the earlier judging convo with this one big takeaway. Check the fruit. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, you will recognize them by their fruit. So what is fruit? It's not the flashy stuff. Fruit is the long game outcome of a life locked in with Adonai. When real transformation cooks, the result becomes evident over time. Humility, purity, mercy, integrity. If those aren't showing up, that's giving sus. Alarm bells on. When considering others, ask yourself this question. Does their impact on those around them cultivate love? Does it cultivate justice? Does it cultivate repentance, holiness, care for the vulnerable? Or does it churn out division, favoritism, and harm? If it's the latter, that aura is off and we should move on from that mess. Yeshua's thorn bushes don't give grapes bar is peak clarity. Roots determine fruit. What a person is at their core will inevitably show up in the fruit that they produce. Now, let's not get that twisted. Gifts are not the same thing as fruit. Charisma, platform, even performing miracles, which we'll look at deeper here in just a few minutes. Those are gifts. Fruit, however, is kindness, gentleness, patience. Now, I could get up here and sound spiritual, but if my off-camera life is cooked with pride and manipulation, that's brain rot, not holiness. Big brain filter, fruit beats gifts every day of the week. Fruit, much more important than gift. That's why many who will be considered great in the kingdom may never play in a worship band or deliver a sermon or never even hold any type of official position at a church or fellowship. They simply loved well, cared for others, and reflected the love of Messiah to everyone around them. We need to be diligent to look beneath the wool. Don't glaze over red flags just because the presentation is serving on stage. If the vibe is off, call sus, but do it in love. But leaders should be evaluated by the character that they display when the camera is off, when the mic isn't in front of them, and when there's no platform for them to stand on. Watch the wake that someone leaves. If a leader speaks, what follows from that message? Freedom from bondage? Unity in truth? Or factionalism and exploitation? Outcomes don't lie. Beware the Riz trap. Charisma without character gives you the ick later. Yeah, you like that meme, Hamid? Mm-hmm. Riz with righteousness, that's peak. Bottom line, evaluate others by what shows when no one is looking. If the outcomes are love, justice, repentance, holiness, and care for the vulnerable, that's giving kingdom vibes. If it's exploitation and division, hard pass. And now we come to the part that I referenced earlier, and is where I stop the Gen Alpha speech. All right, so verses 21 through 23 were a wake-up call from me back in 2004. To tell that story, I need to back up and share with you some background. When I was 5 years old, my mom, who was raised Catholic, started attending a Protestant church. At 7 years old, I then made my own confession of faith. A few years later, my parents ended up getting divorced. I was left to my own devices at that stage. I was the oldest of three. All of a sudden, I was the man of the house and taking care of my little brothers. My mom had to go to work full time. I was left alone. I got to make my own decisions, do my own thing. Now, I was basically a good kid, but I was living as if being saved meant that I could do whatever I wanted to, because I had my eternal salvation locked up, so I could go do anything. I basically had a good moral center, but as a teenager, I certainly was not living for the Lord. Now, all that changed my freshman year in college. In November of 1990, yeah, way back then, I rededicated my life to the Lord, and I began living for Him in a real and meaningful way. Then that next year as a sophomore, I helped plant a church on my college campus, and I became one of the student leaders. I was leading Bible studies for our fellowship and everything. That same year, I moved into on-campus apartment, and I got a job at a Christian bookstore. Now, while I was stocking the shelves, I came across this new release that I put on the shelf. It was called The Jewish New Testament. And this was David Stern's precursor to what we now know as the complete Jewish Bible. And I also stocked on the shelves some Paul Wilbur music. You guys ever hear that guy? Those encounters then started to spark new thoughts within me. Simultaneously, one of my roommates was Jewish. Now, he was a non-practicing agnostic kind of Jew, but being around him still led to many interesting conversations. He even convinced me to enroll in Hebrew in college, and so I ended up taking a Hebrew course my senior year in college that would prove to be tremendously helpful in years later. Now, fast forward a bit. A couple years after graduation from college, I moved from Illinois, where I grew up, to Florida, and I started attending a church there. And by the way, I met my wife on the third day I was in Florida, but that's another story for another time. I also, though, became friends with a guy from the church, and the two of us, every Saturday night, we would end up going downtown to downtown Orlando. We would go down there and we would witness to people. We'd take sack lunches for the homeless people and things of this nature. And one of those nights, I remember coming back home with him, and these thoughts had been running in my head, and I started to challenge him. And I asked him, if the biblical Sabbath is on Saturday, why do we meet on Sunday at our church? And he answered with the reference to the Lord's Day and certain platitudes like this, and suggested that something had changed over the course of time. Now, I didn't buy it, but I also at that point didn't know enough to press the point. So over the next several years, I kind of lived in a land of theological agony. I began studying for my ministerial license to minister with the denomination that I was involved in, but I found too much in their core doctrine that I just completely disagreed with, so I set that aside and I never picked it up again. But week after week in church, I'd look at my Bible and ask, why do I see things in my Bible I don't see in church? And then I'd look in my church and I'd say, why do I see things in church I don't see in my Bible? And it became a serious source of frustration for me. Now, my motivation for moving to Florida after college was simple. My mother and my little brother had moved from Illinois to Florida when I was in high school. I moved down there to be with them, and shortly after I arrived in Florida, I was talking with my mom, and our conversation turned to some of the things that I'd been learning. I ended up giving her my Hebrew notes from the class that I took, and I gave her my Jewish New Testament, and I gave her the Paul Wilbur and stuff like this, and she basically went off the deep end. About a year later, she blazed out of the church in a true Torah terrorist fashion. This is where that picture is. Thank you. Burning bridges and calling everyone pagan for their Christmas trees and their Easter bunnies along the way. Now, from where I sat, I believe that my mother was at least close to the right path, theologically speaking. Her conclusions were accurate, but the way she went about things was all wrong for me. I knew in my heart that I would have to address the theological conundrums that I found myself in before I followed her down that path. I could see real truth in my mother's newfound love for the Torah and the Sabbath. But if I was ever going to follow her down that path, I wanted to do it in a way that I could answer questions rationally and calmly, not in a Torah terrorist style. Then one night, my mom called and she begged me to come to this conference with her. So she drove, she came and picked me up. I was stuck with no escape. So 2 men came and they spoke that evening at this conference. The first, to me, at that time, was everything that was wrong with the Messianic movement. This guy was dressed in weird robes. He danced on the stage and spun around to some Hebrew song, and then he spent 50 minutes saying absolutely nothing of any interest to me. Then there was an intermission. Had there been a car that I could drive, I would have been gone. But I was stuck there because I was with my mom. So then the second speaker came up to the stage after the intermission, and he wore a dress shirt and slacks. No costume, no dance. No gimmicks. He just came up and preached the word. Now, his message really wasn't about Matthew 7, but he read from these verses anyway, and it changed my life that night in 2004. Those verses were, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do mighty works in your name?' And then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" Now, for many people who start reading their Bibles and conclude that the Torah is for them, it's usually passages about the festivals, or maybe about the Sabbath, or maybe Psalm 119 that puts the Torah in such amazing light. Something like that. That's normally the way that people awake to the Torah. Those type of passages typically light a fire in them to learn more. Not me. You see, in college, I'd read the Bible cover to cover 7 times. I knew the book very well. I'd read Matthew 7 countless times. But that night in 2004, the passage came alive in a completely new way to me. Those verses struck me square between the eyes. My thoughts raced because, wait a minute, these people that Jesus rejects, they're prophesying in his name. They're casting out demons in his name. They're doing mighty works in his name. These aren't pew warmers. These are active, passionate, on fire for the Lord people. And Jesus tells them, "Get out." What does this mean for me? I claim to be living for him, but I haven't done any of those things. I haven't healed anyone. I haven't cast out any demons. What does this mean for me? So I immediately called my buddy and set up a breakfast to meet him the next morning. Now, ironically, this was my first official step into keeping Torah. And it just happened to be on a Shabbat when I went to a restaurant and paid someone to serve me. Anyway, so I challenged him with this passage. And for the next year, every Sunday after church, he and his wife, me and my wife, we got together every Sunday afternoon and we started studying. After a year, we looked at each other and we knew what we had to decide. Continue in the angst and frustration that we'd been living with, or leave our church and start our own means of honoring the Sabbath. Now, ultimately, we decided we could not keep ignoring what we had learned. So we started our own small Sabbath fellowship that then began to grow. Now, most of you know my daughter, Lindsay, back there, right? She was 2 years old at this stage. She's 22 now. It's been 20 wonderful, rewarding, amazing years of fulfillment and peace, embracing the instructions of the King. And it was these verses in Matthew chapter 7 that Adonai used to wake me up. Now, here it is 20 years later. I still haven't cast out a demon or performed a miracle, but I know for certain that I'm one of his children and that I will hear from him, well done, good and faithful servant. Not because I'm special, not because I've done marvelous things, but because he's special and he's done marvelous things. And because I've submitted myself to his entire word and what it says. And I know now that being lawless means exactly what Yeshua is saying in these verses, denying his Torah. By aligning my life with his expressed will and living in harmony with his instructions, I trust that I will be counted among the sheep that are gathered at his right hand and not among the goats that are sent away from his presence. I am deeply, truly thankful for that 21 years ago, he took pity on me and used this passage to strike me between the eyes and to make me question everything. Only by his grace were my eyes opened. The fullness of his word and everything that is there became new to me. And I'm humbled that he would welcome me into his flock and count me as his own. It's my joy to pursue his desires. I owe him a debt that I can never pay, and I will live for him eternally, no matter what happens around me. Now, for most of you here today, you're here because your parents chose this walk of faith. Some of you have made that decision for yourselves, but many of you have followed your parents down this path. For at least some, the decision to live for Yeshua, no matter what the cost, isn't yet your own. You're just going with the flow, or you're here because your parent or your grandparent brought you here. I'll let Brian speak to that in a few minutes. But these next verses are for you. In verses 24 through 27, Yeshua goes on to say, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. Some of you have made the decision to put your house on the rock. Hopefully, most of you here can say that your house of faith is truly built upon Yeshua. For those of you who can't say that with honesty and conviction, I assure you, no matter what life brings, he is the faithful foundation that never moves. However chaotic things become, you can rely on him. He will be there for you, and you can trust in his constant presence to sustain you every day of your life. For those who haven't yet made that decision, I can't offer the reassurance that your house will still stand. If your life isn't planted firmly on the rock of Yeshua, there is no guarantee that your house will stand when the storms come. If you're here because of your parents' faith and not your own profession, now's the time. Today is the day to let Yeshua become the bedrock of your life. For those who are waiting still, time's up.